6 months ago.
يعني كأنك هلا عملتي هيك فيلم صح؟ بس أنا كنت تشتغل عليه.
that I prepared, and now I'll show you a video that I. And here's a video I prepared to share with you, and I hope you enjoy.
بدون الفيديو ما حيتشكل already جربتها يعني هذا بس تقول إنه لا تحكي
قديش الساعة؟ تنتين.
So I think you're gonna start when they tell you to. But Ghufran, who's gonna sit here?
to have you. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Christian Hollick. My wife Tiffany and I are co-pastors here at St. Peter's Lutheran Church. And on behalf of the church, we say welcome, salam alaikum, ahlan wa sahlan. In today's gospel reading, well, I guess I'll start by saying bathrooms. If anybody needs a bathroom, if you head out the sanctuary and turn right down that hallway, there's a men's room and then a women's room. In today's gospel reading this morning, Jesus told a parable about a widow, in many ways marginalized by her society, yet tenacious and persistent in asking for justice. Jesus said that is how we are to pray persistently for justice. The voices that I've heard over the years at the Tree of Life conference, the voices of Palestinians, the voices of Muslims, Christians, and Jews, have relentlessly pursued justice. The work of the Tree of Life, and here on the Cape, especially through Elaine Brouillard and a small but dedicated group of volunteers, have lifted these voices and stories. My privilege and joy in welcoming you today is even greater this year because one of my daughters, Joanna, spent 8 weeks in Bethlehem this last summer. She described her experience as incredibly eye-opening, moving, and heart-wrenching. And she said, "I feel that the time that I spent in Palestine will forever be a meaningful and life-changing part of my life." She had the opportunity to visit Hebron also, where she said the hospitality of the Palestinians was heartwarming. She said, "We had tea and cookies with 2 different shop owners who readily invited us into their shops for conversation." And that little remark stays with me today, for it is with great joy that here today we can listen and share in conversation, and then, here in this place, share some cookies and tea. Welcome. Elaine?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elaine Brouillard. I'm on the board of Tree of Life Educational Fund and coordinator for our Cape Cod programs. It's wonderful to see some familiar faces since we haven't been able to get together for a few years. And we're very happy to welcome you again and to what promises to be a very informative and impactful program. Just when the Tree of Life leadership team began thinking that we might be able to have a fall program this year, one of our faithful Cape Cod volunteers, Noreen Thompson, came to us and proposed the idea of focusing on the West Bank city of Hebron, or Al-Khalil, its Arabic name. Noreen had been on 2 Tree of Life journeys and was most impacted by her visits to Hebron, where the injustices of the Israeli occupation are so dramatically on display. I've been on 4 Tree of Life journeys, and I also found the situation in Hebron to be very upsetting. We saw above the marketplace nets to catch trash thrown by settlers, boarded up shops and homes on Shuhada Street, the sign at the edge of a Jewish cemetery, "Palestine never existed and never will." And we encountered Jewish settlers being escorted down the street by Israeli soldiers carrying machine guns. Today, we're excited to bring you 4 speakers of diverse backgrounds who all share a connection to Hebron. Dalia, who also participated in our 2019 program, Sadek, both of whom were raised and live in Hebron. Mella, a student from the Netherlands who recently spent 3 months living in Hebron to experience the occupation firsthand. And Melissa, who works for community peacemaker teams, which partners with Palestinians to transform violence and oppression in the Hebron area. And they will have a lot to share with you. We hope you will stay after the program to meet our speakers, enjoy some light refreshments, and browse our bazaar of Palestinian foods and crafts. We're very happy to have Linda Cohen here to sell a wide selection of Palestinian products that she stocks in her shop on Martha's Vineyard. So if anybody goes to the vineyard, you should really look up her shop. Now to introduce the speakers, I'll turn this over to the incredible visionary and passionate advocate for human rights, Reverend David Good. As senior minister at the First Congregational Church of Old Lyme, Connecticut, after 9/11, David led his congregation to learn about conditions in Palestine, and this resulted in the formation of the Tree of Life Educational Fund. Now I'd like you to please welcome David.
Good afternoon. Wonderful to be back with you once again, and what a beautiful, beautiful day it is. I can't believe it. After the storm that we had, at least in Connecticut a few days ago, I think you had it even worse. So what a great opportunity to be back together again, and my pleasure to introduce our visitors for today. I also want to thank St. Peter's Lutheran for the incredible hospitality you've shown not only today, but over all the years that we've been bringing Tree of Life programs to the Cape. So thank you, Christiane, and your family, and all the leadership of St. Peter's Lutheran. The word friendship should be central to our conversation today. Melissa, who comes from Pennsylvania, I remember a license plate that they used to have on there saying, "You always have a friend in Pennsylvania." Perhaps you remember seeing that as well. One of my favorite license plates. And then Al-Khalil, that you see, that's the name of the city that is known by most of us as Hebron. In fact, we had some conversation among ourselves whether or not we should call this program the City of Hebron or the City of Al-Khalil. As you know, in this country, we have a conversation going about place names, wanting to honor the indigenous names of places, which is a conversation we should have. But of course, Hebron is a name that is known more widely, so we stayed with that, but we resolved that we would also use Al-Khalil as much as possible. And Al-Khalil, as I understand it, means friend or friendship. And there's a good reason for that. One of the most familiar of the biblical stories, or at least should be familiar, is how Abraham came down from the region now known as Iraq, probably, and came down, and he sat under a big tree in a community that came to be known as Al-Khalil. And he was confronted by 3 visitors. Now, in his tent, does he make room for those strangers, or does he exclude them? Does he invite them in for tea, or does he turn them away? He invited them in, and so that that expression of friendship stuck, and it became then the name of that place that would ultimately be known as Al-Khalil. At one time, there was a big tree, an oak tree, that gave him shelter, gave his tent shelter, and it was over time then that it came to be known in the letter of Hebrews. Perhaps you remember a very famous line: "Entertain strangers, for you never know when you will be entertaining angels unawares." How many of you remember that story from? Yeah. So, welcome the stranger, for you never know when you may be entertaining angels unawares. In this age of xenophobia, in this age where we want to turn our back on anybody that comes to our shores or our borders, we should remember the symbol of the Statue of Liberty holding up a lamp for those strangers, welcoming them, because indeed in welcoming those strangers, we're welcoming angels unawares. Well, over time, that giant oak tree of Mamre, as it's called, began to die. And at one point it was declared dead, and as a person who likes to use a lot of firewood, I might have been there with a chainsaw to cut it up for my winter purposes. But fortunately, there were those that said, no, leave it alone. And the oak tree of Mamre is inside a Russian Orthodox church. And back in the 90s, a shoot appeared on the oak tree of Mamre, coming up from the roots, telling you that the tree itself might look dead, but there's life underneath the surface. And as I think about our visitors here today, they are an example of that live shoot that's coming up from the roots of the oak tree of Mamre, saying that hospitality and what it means to be a sanctuary, what it means to be a place of hospitality, that spirit is very much alive. So as we welcome our visitors today, know that you're welcoming a part of that oak tree of Mamre, and a reminder that the tradition of hospitality is alive and well. It's alive here in our visitors. It's alive in St. Peter's Lutheran. It's alive wherever people open their doors to the stranger. So for our visitors, you should all have their printout that has a more extensive biographical sketch of our visitors. I won't read that, but I'll remind you that Dahlia, where's Dahlia? Dahlia over here. Dahlia was with us back a few years ago, and Dahlia at that time was an ambassador of Bethlehem University. And it's wonderful to welcome her back now. She was, since she went back home, she was also working at a hotel in Hebron that's named the Abu Mazen Hotel. And we weren't aware of that, so our group actually stayed there on their last visit. And now she also served a stint helping out with a new university called the Smart University in Hebron, or Al Khalil. And now she's working with a great effort, which is called Expo, Hebron Expo. One of the thing that is really quite huge, and we encounter it all the time with our Palestinian olive oil project, is how important it is for the Palestinian products to go out on market. So as they look to revive the economy of Hebron and throughout Palestine, the work that Dahlia is doing is so very important. And of course, she looks like a fashion model too. So, thank you, Dahlia. Sadek, I just met Sadek for the first time yesterday, right? And Sadek is a graduate of the University of Hebron, and I was absolutely delighted well, let me say, first of all, he's a great volunteer with a soup kitchen in Hebron. And as we have a soup kitchen that operates every single Saturday in our church facilities at home. And we had to fight for that because there were those inside the church and those outside the church that said, no, we don't want to mess up our pretty building by having a soup kitchen. And there were those on various town commissions who said, well, you know, we'll give you the right to build your new building, but don't use it only for church-related people or activities. And our board said no to that. They wanted to be a place of hospitality for anyone who needed a soup kitchen. So that was wonderful to hear about Sadek's involvement in the soup kitchen. And also, he made my day about a week ago when I learned that his favorite poet, he's a student of English literature, and his favorite poet is Emily Dickinson. So you'll learn more about that later, but that made my day. And next Saturday, we have tickets to go visit Emily Dickinson's home and museum in Amherst. So welcome, Sadek. And Melissa. Melissa is a new friend of mine, to me. I've known the community peacemaking team for a number of years. I knew them as a Christian peacemaker team. But the person that led us through the last time was a woman, a Muslim woman by the name of Mona. And they, in order to show themselves to be more inclusive, have changed their name to the Community Peacemaking Teams. And Melissa comes from Pennsylvania, as I mentioned, and they do incredible work. And we've relied upon them in breaking the silence to lead us in our various tours of Hebron or Al Khalil. So Melissa, it's great to welcome you. And she has a special role with them that I'll let her tell the story about the role that she has with that organization. And then Mela, where's Mela? Mela took some, I had to use my private investigative efforts to find out where she was. I first read about her. If you don't read the publication, I urge you to read the publication Mondoweiss. In terms of being a conduit for truth, I can't imagine a better publication than Mondoweiss. You can get it online, and so I alternate between reading Gideon Levy on Haaretz or turning over to Mondoweiss and Philip Weiss, and Adam Horowitz has spoken at some of our Tree of Life conferences in the past. And Mela wrote an outstanding article called Illegal Kings on Palestinian Land. And when I read that, and our focus was on the city of Al Khalil or Hebron, I said, we've got to find out where she is and see if it might be possible for her to come. And I talked to Elaine about that, and she agreed. And so we set off trying to find out where she was. And we relied upon Philip Weiss to communicate with Mela over in the Netherlands. And then we were communicating and finally one thing led to the next, and she's here. And tomorrow morning, watch for her. She's going to be swimming out with the sharks. So those are our visitors, and I know that they're going to encounter the oak tree of Mamre and the hospitality that all of you extend to them. So let's give them a warm welcome to our community.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming here today. It's my pleasure to be here today to represent my city, Hebron, and talk about the actual suffering of the people of my city that is located in the southern of Palestine. It's okay. Slide 2. Yeah. I would like to start my presentation today to speak about the Ibrahim Mosque, that is symbol for the three Abrahamic faith and the fourth holiest place for Muslims around the world. As you see here in the picture, 4000 BC, Prophet Abraham bought a cave in Hebron to bury his wife Sarah, and later on, Prophet Abraham and his sons with their wives were buried there too. And then the Ibrahimi Mosque was built above the cave, and there is no specific date that proves the date of establishment of Al-Ibrahimi Mosque. Also, I would like to say that Al-Ibrahimi Mosque has suffered throughout many areas, unfortunately, until today. As we all see here in the picture, this guy named Dr. Baruch Goldstein. Dr. Baruch Goldstein, he is an American citizen, moved to Hebron on the holy month of Ramadan on 25 of February 1994. He opened the fire on the worshippers in the Ibrahimi Mosque and killed 29 Palestinians and wounded 150 Palestinians. Also, IOF, the Israeli occupation the forces, helped him and closed the whole doors for Al-Ibrahimi Mosque and abandoned the ambulance to enter Al-Ibrahimi Mosque and aid Palestinians. So, as the result of what he did, he killed in return. The consequences of this horrifying massacre is 1. Call for a prayer is banned. Mosque has separated into two parts, 16% for Israeli Jew and 40% for Muslims. Dozens of military checkpoints, surveillance cameras. As you see here in the picture, can you return back, please? As you see in the picture, this camera called the surveillance camera. This camera, it is inside, outside, and around Al-Ibrahimi Mosque. Also, next, as you see here, these are some of the checkpoints. Each time me, my family, my friends want to pray in the Ibrahimi Mosque, we have to pass through many checkpoints to pray in the Ibrahimi Mosque. And one of the consequences, the Hebron Protocol. Hebron Protocol, it is an agreement between the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli government. This protocol include that H1 area, it is under the Palestinian Authority, and H2 area is under the Israeli military control. So, this area, it is under the Palestinian control called H1 area, and this one in the yellow, this is H2 area, it is under the Israeli military control. Also, consequences number 5, the settlers' behavior. Well, in the old town of Hebron, Palestinians, they cannot move freely in Hebron because the settlers keep do some harassments on children and women. They are given the green light to do whatever they want for Palestinians because they are under protection of IOF, the Israeli occupation forces. Number 6, the entire streets, such as Al-Shuhada Street and 18,000 of shops were closed by military orders. Also, 14,000 families abandoned their homes, fearing for their lives and forcing them to leave their homes. That's why we call Hebron, the old town of Hebron, the ghost town. As we see here in the map, here is the Ibrahim Mosque, and here is Al-Shuhada Street, where Al-Shuhada Street, the street that were closed by military orders. So we are Palestinians, cannot go there. We are not allowed to walk there, all the areas in the red, because we are Palestinians. All the Palestinians who born and raised in Palestine are not allowed to cross these streets in the red lines. But I want to say that my friends in the Tree of Life organization, when they visited Hebron, they were able to visit these streets because they are an American citizens. Also, Hebron is the only city in Palestine that has in it is hard as settlements. We have many settlements inside and around Hebron. One of them, Bet Romano settlement. Bet Romano settlement, it was a school before the massacre. And then after the horrifying massacre, it turned out to be a settlement and called Bet Romano. And these are also settlements. Well, despite all the pain, at the end of the day, there is always hope and there is always light at the end of the tunnel. So allow me to quote Emily Dickinson. She say, "Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tone without words and never stops at all," which is why I would like to inform you that Hebron is considered the capital of economy in Palestine, and it has one of non-charitable, such as Tekiya, that Sadiq will elaborate about it right now. Go ahead, Sadiq.
So would you please just... Hello everyone, it's Sadiq Sidr, and I'm really delighted to be here today. I do feel that I'm home, so thank you for your warm greetings, and thanks for your hospitality. Please, the one before. Well, as an English literature student, there is a statement that I always say and I would like to begin with. It says, "Some stories deserve to be popular novels," and today's story is one of them. Please, the next one. Well, since I was a child, I always wondered why my grandpa has been taking food, such as bread, oil, or other stuff, every Saturday to the place I'll talk about. As a kid, there was always, kind of feeling pushing me to discover what's going on. I really detested going with them, grabbing and holding all these heavy materials. Finally, for me, being a curious kid, it's been so touching for me to see my grandpa and to discover that he has been helping feed the poor and needy people in his community. I always felt proud of him and myself. So frankly speaking, my grandpa made that place an essential part of my life as a Palestinian from Hebron. The place is one of the most non-charitable organizations, which is the Taqiyya of the Prophet Abraham, which is soup kitchen that has such an impressive story. Yeah, keep it on this page. Why is it named as such? It's named as such after the prophet Abraham, who's known for his generosity and the fact that he gave a hand to all needy people. So the principles of the taqiyya are inspired by the traits of the prophet Abraham. Please go. So talking about its establishment, the taqiyya went through 3 phases in terms of its location. So it was originally founded 950 years ago during the era of the Islamic leader Saladin in Palestine. And it was exactly near to the Ibrahimi Mosque. It consisted of 40 rooms. It offered 3 meals a day, including breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It included a bakery, baking more than 15,000 loaves of bread, a mill, and rooms for visitors to have rest and sleep. It had been serving people until 1964 before it was demolished to expand the space around the mosque. The second location was directly built far away from the Ibrahimi Mosque, yet it was smaller and never adequate to meet the needs and to provide services as it used to. In order to serve more people, in 1984, the third location was built near Al-Ibrahimi Mosque again with a bigger building and better services. Talking about its services, well, to get a closer look on how the taqiyya works, I thought that the best way is to interview one of its workers. So I would like to quote Abu Hassan, who has been working for 21 years in the taqiyya. He stated that, "My colleagues and I work year-round to kindly serve all people who are in need. The taqiyya offers the Ibrahimi soup 5 times a week and main meals twice a week, such as chicken, meat, or other delicious meals." You know the idiom that says, "An apple a day keeps doctors away," so I created an idiom for this story, which is, "A meal per day, hunger goes away." Because of the taqiyya, Hebron is considered to be the city where nobody sleeps while being hungry. In my interview with Abu Hassan, he told me that usually from 2,000 to 8,000 people get their food from the taqiyya of the Prophet Abraham. And in Ramadan, the number is always doubled. It's also worthy to elaborate about the vital role of the taqiyya in the revival of the Old Town. Because, imagine if there was no taqiyya. These thousands of people may have never walked in or visited the Old Town. Because of this major role, in 2017, the Israeli occupation wanted to get rid of the taqiyya and uprooted it while it was repaired. But their efforts were in vain because of the resistance of the taqiyya workers who maintain providing all needed supplies. Please do the next. Also, for me, the most impressive moment was when Abu Hassan told me that so many donors who support the taqiyya excessively were broke in the past, lived and relied on taqiyya just like my grandpa. Which is why I feel that the taqiyya of the Prophet Abraham is unique. Therefore, all needy and poor people know that once their financial status get better, they're going to go back and aid the place that fed them at some point. How does the taqiyya get funded? Whatever food is provided is due to the charity and donations that the taqiyya has been receiving since it was established, because the taqiyya mainly depends on the donations from inside and outside the country to maintain its continuous duty of serving and assisting whoever needs it. 60% of the taqiyya expenses are covered by the people of the city of Hebron, and the rest is donated by other Palestinians, tourists, or organizations such as the Tree of Life Educational Fund that has been providing the financial and moral support to the taqiyya through its continuous and constant visits to the taqiyya. Let me tell you that all the beautiful and great things I shared with you would have never occurred without the generosity and kind-hearted people just like you. And all of this has just inspired me and reminded me of a poem of my favorite poet, Emily Dickinson, who said, "If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting ropping unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain." There is also the video I prepared to share with you. So please, Melissa.
Some stories deserve to be popular novels, and today's story is one of them. It is the story of providing supplies and food for those who are in need for free. For a millennium, and in a city that is well known for its generosity, the Taqiyya of the Prophet Abraham, which is located beside Al Ibrahimi Mosque, has been providing poor and needy people with their basic needs such as food. Because of this Taqiyya, Hebron is called the city in which nobody sleeps while being hungry, for it provides food on daily basis year-round. It offers a great number of meals every day. For instance, it provides from 2,000 to 3,000 meals per day. But in Ramadan, the number of meals is always doubled. So it offers from 8,000 to 10,000 break and fast meals, including meat and chicken. All this charitable work would have never started without the huge, remarkable amount of donations, because the Taqiyya mainly depends on both the internal donations from the city of Hebron and other Palestinian cities, and the external donations from tourists and the organizations that support the Taqiyya excessively, such as the Tree of Life for Educational Fund organization that provides the financial and moral support to the Taqiyya through its continuous and constant visits to it, which is why we would like to show our enormous gratitude to the mentioned organization for its generous assistance.
That was everything. Thank you. And thank you. And it's been my pleasure being here. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Gufran Lababidi. It's my honor to serve Tree of Life as a president. I have been working with Tree of Life since 2016, and in the year of 2018 I was president, and it's my pleasure and my honor as well. I'm here today with you to share about the journey. It's an annual journey that run by Tree of Life to the Holy Land. Every year, Tree of Life runs a journey and allows travelers from this country to go and see things in the Holy Land with their eyes. Muslim, Christian, Jews, they all join in one group. They go and enjoy the journey and enjoy the experience and stand in solidarity with the Palestinians. Our journey for this year, it's called a night journey in the pursuit of the prophetic wisdom. Oh, I need my glasses. Sorry. In the year 621, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has made a journey by night from the great mosque in Mecca to what is called today the Dome of the Rock, the Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. On this journey, Prophet Muhammad got the chance to pray with all great prophets, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and others. So with that, each year, Tree of Life travels toward the Holy Land and gives opportunity to the travelers to travel and to stand in solidarity with the Palestinians, as I mentioned. As we are overwhelmed with the darkness in the land, with all the political corruption, greed, nationalism, fear, and war as well, we all need to learn from the wisdom of the prophets, past and present. So with that, we can add our own prophetic voices to this troubled world. I will be honored to lead this journey, and I would love to invite you all to join me. It will be an exciting journey. Every year we have an extension to one of the neighboring countries, and this year it's going to be an extra special. It's going to be to the Saudi Arabia. With the changes that happen in that region, the non-Muslim friends, they will be able to join, and they will be standing in solidarity with the Muslim for first time in Saudi Arabia. So I would love to share this news with you, and I would love to invite you. I hope you can join us. Thank you.
And it's time for me to offer my commercial for our scholarship program. Many of you, I know, have been using our Palestinian olive oil, and we're now beginning to expand our products. We now have dates, and I can attest to the fact that they're some of the best dates that I've ever had. They're Majul dates, and we have a number of other products as well, including the kefir. And what do we do with this? We use it to finance our scholarship program. When I think of one of the things that's most important is the infusion of hope for the Palestinian people. And by making it possible for the young people to go to school, you're providing an infusion of hope for those families. And I have to say that I've never seen such a high priority that the Palestinians place on education. It's incredible, really. Considering the likelihood of employment afterwards, the fact that they keep on encouraging their children to get higher education is an infusion of hope for me. It's easy for all of us to become discouraged from time to time. And seeing the Palestinian families work and work and work to make it possible for the young people to go to college and postgraduate work is nothing short of inspiring. So we sell the Palestinian olive oil and the other products to help make that possible. We call this education in a bottle. This bottle costs $25. We also have a tin that goes for $20. We have our Muslim friends use a lot of olive oil, and so they like the 3-liter tins that we have that sell for $50. And now our latest delivery has an even larger tin. I hold this one up in particular because the last place in Palestine that you can purchase where you can kefirs are made is right there in Al Khalil. And Dalia and Sadak know the place well, and they picked up a new supply for us that they brought over. So the kefir, you heard the word kefir. For some of you, that may be a new word, but this is used as, you can put it around your neck, around your head. We also use it as a tablecloth when we put our Palestinian olive oil out on display. So know that in buying these kefirs, you're supporting the academic scholarships for the Palestinian families. So thank you.
Sorry about our technical difficulties. You would think that after 2 years of pandemic, we would have all this figured out, all the technology. So thank you so much for welcoming all of us today and for desiring to hear the stories that we bring. I want to thank Tiffany for being very patient with our technology issues this morning and helping us out, and for Christian, for both the pastors for inviting us here, and for Tree of Life for inviting me to be part of this presentation, this conference. Thank you for opening your hearts and your souls to the work of creative nonviolence and liberating love. I want to thank you on behalf of my colleagues at Community Peacemaker Teams for listening today. Today, my colleagues are working in Palestine and the West Bank, in Colombia, in northern Iraq, Iraqi Kurdistan, on Lesbos, the Greek island where migrants are crossing the sea to look for a better life. On this land, alongside of Native people who are struggling to keep their land, and First Nations people in Canada. They are also on the US-Mexico border, accompanying migrants who are under threat of kidnapping on the Mexico side before they cross into the US to make asylum claims. Community Peacemaker Teams was founded over 35 years ago as Christian Peacemaker Teams by people of faith in the United States and Canada who believe deeply in creative, nonviolent resistance to war and violence. And to this day, we place teams at the invitation of local peacemaking communities that are confronting situations of lethal conflict. These teams support and amplify the voices of brave local peacemakers who risk injury and death by waging nonviolent direct action to confront systems of violence and oppression. We accompany people. We do a lot of walking. We do a lot of drinking tea in people's homes. We advocate. We listen to stories. We tell stories. We are rooted in deep and diverse spiritual backgrounds and practices. It's my privilege to be here with you all today, and I want to bring into this space my Palestinian teammates, who you'll be introduced to in a few minutes through pictures, but I want to bring into this space Mona, Amira, Shahad, Tartil, Ahmed, and Baha, who are all serving in Al-Khalil in Hebron today. I wish that one of them were here with you today instead of me, but it was much easier for me to take Amtrak up here from Philadelphia than to bring them. But I was just with their team in Palestine for the month of June, and the team has helped me to prepare and told me what they want me to convey to you about their work and their beloved city of Al-Khalil. So as for me, I'm the care coordinator for CPT. So the work that we do is potentially traumatizing. We witness a lot of violence. People experience violence firsthand, but hear a lot of stories of violence that has happened and also witness a lot. So it's potentially traumatizing. So my job is to work with people to try to debrief what's happening, try to provide space to listen, to grieve, to celebrate things that we need to hold spiritual space as a community as we need to. And I'm here doing this work because I believe our liberation is bound up together. Civil rights activist Fannie Lou Hamer said, "Nobody's free until everybody's free," and isn't that true? And for me, for many years, I believed this. I believed in collective liberation. I believed that my liberation was bound up with the liberation of others. But it didn't sink into my bones until I arrived in Palestine as a mother of two small children. And it was there in Palestine that I saw children in Al-Khalil who could not walk to school safely. I saw them pass by settlers who insulted them and threw stones at them. I saw little itty-bitty kids who were treated like criminal suspects by every day having to go through checkpoints and having their tiny little backpacks searched on the way to school. And do you know what they're asked? Do you have a weapon? Do you have anything sharp in your bag? Numerous times a day. Now, as a mom, you will do anything to protect your children and to make a world in which they will thrive and be safe. And this is when my soul had this realization that there is no such thing as other people's children. They are all the responsibility of each one of us. Until each child can stand tall and safe in their own dignity and on their own land, no one is truly free. We are all bound together in the struggle against oppression that connects all of us. My teammate Amira, who was born and raised in Al Khalil, said, "Imagine your life were controlled by an unjust occupation, and your right to exercise your normal routine is a conditional decision from the powers that be, closing doors and opening them on a whim. And then imagine that that right to object to this injustice is also forbidden. I think you will agree this is an impossible situation to live with. Until the day when all children can walk to school safely, we must struggle together. And until the day when Palestinians of all ages can travel from Hebron to Gaza to Haifa and put their feet in the Mediterranean Sea, we must struggle. To give you some background on our work in Al Khalil, after the Ibrahimi Mosque, which Dalia explained, CPT sent a delegation to Al Khalil to meet with local people and to offer solidarity and support. In 1995, then, the Hebron Municipal Authority invited CPT's presence. They desired foreigners who could monitor human rights violations and offer unarmed civilian accompaniment to protect Palestinians from settler violence, both in the city and also in the South Hebron Hills, and to advocate for reopening Shahada Street. The original intent was only for the team to stay until Shahada Street was open, and they are still there until this day because Shahada Street is still closed, and H2 remains under Israeli military control. Since then, we have maintained a presence in the old city of Hebron, our office and our apartment back up to Shahada Street, which is closed, and the entrance is right off of the old city where the market is. Our team in Al Khalil is all Palestinian, with foreign volunteers coming in for 90 days or less. That's the longest that we're able to stay on a visa. We have had 10 foreign staff denied entry at the borders since 2018, both land and airport, because we were associated with, I have not been banned, but other people, because they were associated with human rights work on behalf of Palestinians. Most of them had been working on the team in Al Khalil, and at one point or another, they were detained, and soldiers took their passports. And so we believe that's how they had their names at the airport and at the King Hussein Bridge. So our team in Al Khalil has 3 initiatives. First is protective accompaniment, and this is what you see here. This is, our teams meet with school principals and teachers and make sure that the teachers know to call us if there is anything that happens, if soldiers invade the schools or shoot tear gas into the schoolyards. Every single day that school is open, we monitor checkpoints that children pass through on their way to school in the morning and on the way home. We walk students also to school through checkpoints if needed, especially kindergartners. I have another. So our staff are the people that are in the red vests. So we film when soldiers stop children and write reports on what happens to school children. I have a few copies I have a table of all my literature on the back, which I will be happy to talk to you about, but we write a school report twice a year that documents any human rights violations that happen while kids are going to school. So we list how many kids are stopped at checkpoints, how many times they're searched, how many children are detained, how many teachers and school staff are stopped, how long the checkpoints are closed, how late students are to school when the checkpoints are closed. We share these reports with the UN, Amnesty International, Save the Children, and other partners. When children are detained, can you do the next? Thank you. Well, I think these are my pictures are out of order. So this is not the picture I wanted to show. I thought I put them in order, but I didn't. No, go all the way back, all the way. I think it's the first. I think it ended up as the first picture. Keep going back. Yeah. Next. Yes, okay. Thank you. When children are detained, such as you see here, we tell the soldiers what they're doing is against international law. We try to get them to release the children. We used to physically try to stop soldiers from detaining children and arresting them, but it's no longer safe for us to do that. In recent years, the work has turned much more dangerous. Just in the past few months, our staff have been detained several times, and one time last December, a few of our staff members were detained and were assaulted when they were in detention. And the killing of the journalist Shireen Abu Akleh has really made people realize that anyone can be targeted, that there's no safety for anyone who's there. So we've changed our ways of being a little bit just to try to keep our staff safe. Sometimes foreigners can get a little bit more involved. It's more safe if you're a foreigner, because you might be able to, like, the worst thing that can happen to you is you might be deported, but you're not at as much risk of being arrested and jailed for a long period of time. Just this week, an elder woman from Australia, one of our former volunteers, was injured by soldiers when she tried to do this. She tried to kind of intervene and keep a child from being arrested. There's another, maybe go back one more. I really messed up my slides. It's okay. No, go back one. One. Yes. Oh, no, one more back. Sorry. Yes, this one. This is another photo of four children being brought into a military base. So if a child is detained, and what happens is it's rather arbitrary, but what happens is one of the things that kids will do is throw stones at the checkpoint, which is fortified. It's like if you were throwing stones at a bulletproof glass kind of a thing. And then this gives the soldiers an excuse to come out and to arrest children. And it's I can't speak for why every child is doing it, but it's a way of kind of saying we're here, like this is our objection to the occupation of our city. So if a child is detained, then we will stay present with them, and we will try to stay within their eyesight, and our staff can obviously speak to people in their language, in Arabic, and tell them that we're going to stay, and try to get their name, and then we can contact their parents and the principal of the school that they go to. We call the district coordination office to tell them what's happened, and call the parents, and then try to avoid getting them into a military base because there are people watching what's happening. However, despite our efforts, it keeps happening. Just 3 weeks ago, we saw children aged 7 and 8, which is like first and second graders here, who, it was their first day of school. They were going to a new school, and they were not doing anything, and the soldiers at one of the checkpoints near the mosque detained them and told them they wouldn't let them go until they gave the names of other children who were throwing stones. And their parents were not allowed to talk to them. They had no access to a bathroom, food, water, or calling their parents for 4 hours. There were 7 and 8. So our staff, 2 of our staff stayed and watched what was going on, called the parents, called the principal, and then switched, kind of did a rotation of our staff, but we stayed there until they were released. Since the pandemic, most international groups have not returned. So we've seen an uptick in child detentions, use of tear gas and stun grenades against children. There's no one watching, and even if people are watching, the majority of the world is not doing anything about it, so it's just continuing. We've seen an increase in searching of children's school bags at the checkpoints, and they've had 2 notoriously violent brigades there in Hebron. One is still there until December, so we've seen a lot of changes. So if you want to look at all the details, it's in these reports. Some other accompaniment that we do is mosque patrol. So you saw the checkpoints that Dahlia showed where people have to go through to go to mosque. So our staff will go for all of the, like 4 a.m. Friday. They'll monitor the checkpoint to try to make sure that people are able to go through the checkpoint and not have to wait a long time to be able to go to the mosque. And we record the numbers of people that are prevented from passing through and being able to go. We also monitor the settler incursions. Okay, that's maybe the next, that's the one? No, back, sorry. That's it, yes. So on Saturdays and many Jewish holidays, there are settler incursions into the old city. So there's like busloads of people that come, and they go into a military checkpoint, military base. These are Israeli settlers and also tourists, Zionist tourists, and they will be surrounded by people with these giant machine guns and walk through the old city. And many of the Palestinian shops have to be closed so that they can walk through surrounded by soldiers. We have seen in the last few years an exponential increase in both settlers coming into Palestinian areas and also increased settler violence, which we'll hear about next. We're also seeing an increase in settlers carrying pistols and automatic weapons, just casually slung over their shoulders. The gun laws in the West Bank for settlers were relaxed in 2018, including allowing many soldiers who served in the army they're allowed to keep their guns after they get out. If they attain the rank of, I think, lieutenant or something, they can just keep their gun. It's like an automatic, it would be an automatic weapon. We accompany street protests, and we accompany protests that happen to try to keep people from getting their land demolished in the South Hebron Hills. And we coordinate with a lot of other human rights organizations to try to make sure that we're monitoring what's happening, and we're working together to try to have a strong effort. One of the most exciting things that we have started in the last few years, okay, this is the pictures of the yes, thank you. One of the most exciting new projects is called Through Their Lens. And it's a mentoring program for youth in Al Khalil in Hebron. After working for so many years with children at checkpoints, just walking kids to school and things like this, our staff wanted to do something more. We wanted to build the next generation of people who will nonviolently resist the occupation. They wanted to work with children on something life-giving, to both address the ongoing trauma of living under the occupation and to build hope in the young people. Out of this desire, and after talking with other organizations and with youth in H2, this program, Through Their Lens, was born. And it started as a very small initiative that happened during the pandemic. As soon as the pandemic happened, all of our foreign staff were expelled and had to leave. And so we had 2 staff who stayed, who are Palestinian, but they went from a team of 7 to a team of 2. And they wanted to keep documenting what was happening. The occupation did not take a break during the epidemic. So they had this brilliant idea to continue to document the occupation by giving children cameras and teaching them how to use the cameras. And so you can look at our YouTube channel to see some of the videos that kids have made of kids talking about their lives, and follow our social media where we post their photos. Every couple weeks we'll post a series of photos from the kids and the stories that they tell along with it. And there's one more photo of that. Yeah. So these are some of the kids that are part of that program. Our last initiative is to try to capture the history and the stories of the buildings that make up the old city. It's called Stories Within Stones, and we interview people about the history of places like the glass factory and the candy producer and the kindergarten that's near the mosque. And this preserves the Palestinian history of the area and allows us to share it with the world. So I will have a table in the back, and I would love to meet you and talk more about our work. We have information about our work. I have a sign-up sheet if you want to get more emails. Please sign up. I will happily send you emails about our work. And I have also a QR code that you can, it looks like this, that you can point your phone to, and you can give a donation to CPT if you want to support our work. Right there, it will take you to that page. And I really just would love to meet all of you and talk to you. I'm fascinated with the fact that we're so far away, and there are so many of you here today who are interested in hearing these stories, so please come find me. I'll end just with one last thought, one last image. In the summer evenings in Hebron, about 6 p.m., when the heat dies down, there's a gentle breeze that begins to, that you can feel. And many nights I would sit up on the roof of the apartment in that time of night, and I would start to see kites above the rooftops. There are kites made out of black trash bags and some made out of Palestinian flags. And I began to notice groups of kids who were standing on rooftops and trying to make the kites fly. And they were just throwing them up in the air, like trying over and over and over again. And one time I watched the same kids for an entire hour. These children like kept throwing it up, trying to get this thing to go. And I just admired their seemingly endless patience. I was thinking, if this was my kids, they would like throw it up in the air, and then like a few minutes later, they'd just be like, let's do something else. But they kept going, and I just admired them and would like cheer in my heart whenever finally, after many tries, the kite would take to the sky. And it's soaring above the barbed wire, it's soaring above the occupation, higher than the soldiers, and kind of smiling down on the beautiful, gorgeous families that are living in their historic homes. And so, my friends, I want us to learn from the steadfastness of children and never lose hope. May we each day catch a glimpse and work for liberation. May we be courageous, may we risk, may we act to dismantle the occupation. Arundhati Roy says, another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. May it be so. May we see in our lifetimes a free Palestine. Thank you.
What are you doing here? We know you always enter from the other side. Why are you here? The Israeli soldier said to my Palestinian friend when we tried to enter the checkpoint to that part of Hebron that's under the control of the Israeli military. He didn't have to show his identity card because the cameras already recognized him and already showed to the soldiers his family history, his history of movement, and his security rating, whatever that means. And these kind of facial recognition cameras, they have been banned already in a number of US states. The EU calls for its prohibition, and Israel's Supreme Court also prohibited them from appearing in Israeli public spaces. So it's clear that the EU, the USA, and Israel, they do value the right to autonomy and privacy of their own citizens, but not that of the Palestinians. You cannot go back to the Arab part, you are a Jew. The soldier said to my American Jewish friend who came to visit me in the old city of Hebron. Although he came with a Palestinian bus to the Palestinian part, that's what the settlers and the soldiers would call the Palestinian part of Hebron, he wasn't allowed to go back there, as if he would be immediately eaten alive by Palestinians. So he had to take the settler bus back to Jerusalem, where he came from, and I had to walk home alone. Do you have Muslims amongst you? They cannot go further. The soldier said to our tour group, when we were in the old city of Hebron. And from that point on, the Palestinians and the Muslims had to return, and the rest of us could go on. This is Shohada Street, which you've heard of by now. The Netherlands, beautiful country, have a great day. The soldiers would always say to me when I showed my passport. And in Hebron, you become accustomed to showing your passport and saying your religion. And it was the first time that I really felt that it's not because I'm a human that I have human rights, but it's because I'm Dutch and I may not have a contested religious background. So, and for Palestinians, having a passport means the opposite of being granted human rights. By the sole fact of having a Palestinian passport, they're only allowed to move within restricted areas. They have to admit their identity everywhere they go. All their moves are being watched by cameras everywhere, and they face humiliation or worse at the checkpoints when they want to go to their homes, to their family, or to their mosque. And it's impossible for me to lay down all the human rights violations that Palestinians are subjected to, but here I will give a view of what I experienced and what I saw. I lived 3 months in Hebron. The first 2 months why did I go anyway? So I studied Middle Eastern studies, and that's where my interest for Palestine grew. And I have ambitions in journalism, but I felt I needed to see the situation from first hand to say something about it. And that's why I went. And the first 2 months I did volunteer work. I did a human rights program, and I studied Arabic. And then in the last month, thank you. In the last month, I moved to H2, which is, they're already told about it, but this is the part of Hebron that's under the control of the Israeli military. And I conducted my kind of research on settler violence, and that's where I wrote the article about, and that's how I was found. And I'm very grateful for being here, and thank you for listening. So about my time in Hebron, most of the things I'm going to say are not that cheerful, but I did want to say that Hebron is also, for those who haven't gone, it's very beautiful. You can see it on the photos. This is the oldest coffee shop in Hebron. So in Charles Dickens fashion, not Dickinson, Dickens fashion, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna mostly talk about what was the worst. Because even though the city is very beautiful, you cannot ignore that the occupation has settled in the heart of this city. As mentioned before, if you look up, you'll see that there are nets spread above the streets in the old city. And these nets are there to protect the customers of the shops and the shop owners and everyone who's walking there. What are they protecting them from? Well, everything that the settlers throw down. Sticks, old chairs, broken bottles. There are many, you can see it. There are many things lying on there. And in the old city, it's like many of the settlers there, they live on the first floor of the building, so that's where they throw them down from. And shop owners also complain that settlers throw down their dirty water, which of course the nets cannot protect them from. There's one, I think the most famous shop owner, Badr Tamimi, that's him. For those who have been in Hebron, maybe they know him. He has a souvenir shop that's right across from the settlement. So his shop is on the left, and there on the right is the entrance to Beit Hadassah settlement. And he showed me many videos of settlers throwing stones at his shop, and all these times, all his Palestinian pottery that's on display there, and all kinds of things they were broken. And the strange thing is that, as you can see, sorry, can you go one back, please? As you can see, there are watchtowers here. They look right across to Badr's shop. So soldiers would see these things happening. But what the soldiers would do is either nothing, either they would just stand by and let the settlers ruin his goods, or else they shoot tear gas and sound bombs. Badr showed me the canisters that they shot at his shop, and force him to close his shop. And that happens to many of the shops. They are arbitrarily closed for, sometimes the reason is a so-called Jewish holiday, which is not celebrated anywhere in Israel. So sometimes it seems that they're even making these holidays up to be able to close the old city for Palestinians. And so Badr told me that the Israeli soldiers and the settlers alike, they seem to do everything to make it as hard as possible for the shop owners to do their business. And that's convenient because the settlers and soldiers, they make no secret of their aim to advance further and further into the city. Because once in the few of the last weeks I was there, they took over a Palestinian-owned house at the end of Shohada Street. And on the first day, yeah, this is a settler with a gun. It's a bit random now, this photo, but this is in the old city. It's also opposite to Better Shop. And that's better with the canisters. Well, that's all the ruined things. So on the first day of this new settlement, when the settlers took over a house in Shohada Street, there were hundreds and hundreds of settlers walking on Shohada Street, which is close to Palestinians, but not for settlers. And they were constantly guarded by 30 or more Israeli soldiers. And these soldiers, they would stand on the roof of the house, they would stand on the balcony of the house and in front of the house. And it looks like a strange mafia movie. I had never seen such a scene before. And the settlers, they hang around with the soldiers. So there would be army vehicles, and the settlers would just casually converse with the soldiers. And the soldiers were eating ice cream that the settlers handed to them. Whereas, like 50 meters down, the soldiers were harassing Palestinians at checkpoints. And it's actually the Palestinian population that the soldiers have a duty to protect because they have illegally occupied their land. And instead they're protecting the settlers in every move they make. And the Palestinian neighbors, they were desperate because, they already live in this area where they face checkpoints in every direction they go. There are cameras on every wall that even penetrate into their living rooms. And there is already a lot of soldiers in these areas, and there are a lot of settlers already. And now there's a new settler hub, and they know that it's going to make their lives even more unbearable because all the stories that the Palestinian families that live next to settlers tell are the same. Namely, usually on Saturdays and also on Jewish holidays, the settlers would start throwing stuff at their Palestinian neighbors, swearing at them, ruining their cars if they can, ruining their windows. And they seem to do everything to make the Palestinians sick of being in their own house and on their own land. I spoke to one woman, Mahmoud. She's a mother of 3 sons, and she told me that in the past 2 years they had to repair their windows 3 times because it was ruined by settlers. And on one occasion, the settlers, they threw rotten food at them and called them dirty Arabs. And she told me also that this family cannot even enter their own roof anymore because there was an incident. They had a Palestinian flag on their roof, and then a settler came on their roof to take this flag down, and one of the family members pushed the settler away. Nobody got hurt, but for the Israeli military, it was, the moment to forbid them entry into their own roof. And I've seen multiple times that either settlers or soldiers would take down a Palestinian flag. And, this symbolic act of taking down a flag, it shows to me at least very clearly that Israel does not value the sovereignty of the Palestinian people or the self-determination of the Palestinian people, because this is on Palestinian land. It's in the West Bank. It's the little piece of land that they are still left with, and they cannot even put up their own flags. And instead, everywhere in the old city, you would see Israeli flags. One day, we had a political tour by Badia Dweik, which is familiar to you, maybe. So we were in the old city, and I'm not sure where we are with the photos. Anyway, we saw in the distance a group of young settlers approaching us, and they were like 11 settlers, and they were aged 15 to 18. Young, and they were guarded on one side by an Israeli army vehicle, and then there were 2 soldiers on foot, and there was another soldier standing at the other side of the road, and they came towards us, and they, as I wrote in my article, they showed an arrogance that does not match their age. Like, I couldn't imagine myself walking over a street in an occupied land also, with that look on my face, and they yelled things at us in Hebrew that we didn't understand, and one of them made this sign, which can be either peace or victory. Palestinians also sometimes use it for victory, and this was for me a bit strange in this context. And then when they passed us by, we saw a few meters down the road that one of these young settlers spit at a Palestinian man who was sitting in front of his house, on the staircase of his house. And once we passed by this man, he was making movements with his hands, and he tried to say things, but we saw that he was mute. So he couldn't explain what had happened, even though he was very clearly upset. And on the same tour, we were supposed to go to a piece of land which is in between the two settlements of Hebron, which are called Kiryat Arba and Givat Havot. There are some families living here, and they really are enclosed in by these two settlements. But the day before, this was on the 17th of June, an elderly man got attacked by settlers on this land. So our tour guide thought it was maybe not safe to go there. But I wanted to see him, so the next week I joined Badia, the tour leader, to visit this man. So we went to his land. He's 64 years old. His name is Abdul Karim Al-Ja'bari, but he's also called Abu Anan. And his family's land lies in between these two settlements, and there's even a tent on his land which is used by settlers as a synagogue. And this tent, it has been declared illegal by the Israel Supreme Court in 2015. However, soldiers are still allowing settlers to use the tent. So every Saturday and on Jewish holidays, even more, there would come settlers on this land, guarded by soldiers, and do their religious prayers on Abdul Karim's land. And the United Nations documented multiple settler attacks on this family, which ranged from shooting, throwing stones, breaking into their homes, damaging their home, stealing livestock, and stealing crops. And according to the family, the 7 sons and 3 daughters have all been hospitalized due to settler attacks. And the latest to be hospitalized was Abu Anan. I'm sorry for the graphic pictures. He got attacked. He told us a story. He was harvesting olives on his land, and then he was attacked by a settler from behind. He was on his knees, and the settler carried an bended iron pipe that was at the outside of it as sharp as a knife. And in total, he got 3 cuts in his head. And at some point, when Abu Anan turned around to defend himself, the settler tried to throw a very big rock at him, and he defended himself and broke also his arm. So when we found him, his head was covered in cast, and his arm was also covered in cast. And there were also, the perpetrator was one settler, but they were watched by many other settlers who were watching the scene and ready maybe to help the settler. And at some point they all ran away, and Abu Anan ran towards the settlement because there are Israeli soldiers there, and he had to go to the Israeli soldiers because in this part of Hebron the Palestinian police is not allowed. So you would have to go to the Israeli soldiers if you want anything done. And he was bleeding, and he yelled at them that he needed help. So they called an Israeli ambulance. However, by the time that the Israeli ambulance entered the scene, this is his land, and you can see that there are the fences which lead to the settlement. And then on the other side you have more or less the same. When the Israeli ambulance arrived at the scene to help Abu Anan, so did Ofer Hana, which is an infamous settler. He's probably the most famous settler in Hebron because he did many crimes against Palestinians, and he, according to Abu Anan's story, he prevented anyone from providing aid to Abu Anan, and even the Israeli ambulance personnel apparently was too scared to do anything when they were confronted by him. So nobody helped him, nobody gave him first aid while he was bleeding seriously from his head. And at some point, Abu Anan's wife, because she was terrified, she called the Palestinian Red Crescent, which is the Palestinian ambulance. And even this, it may not always come because the Palestinian ambulance would have to go through Israeli checkpoints to arrive at the scene. And sometimes they are held there for a long time, which happened in the past. But luckily, fortunately, this time it came. It took Abu Anan to the hospital. And in the meantime, Abu Anan's soldiers, who were still, Abu Anan's sons, who were still in his house, saw how the settlers had taken out a speaker from their house to the police station, which is in the settlement, and they sang "Abu Anan is dead." However, even though Abu Anan needed 30 stitches in his head, he was not dead. And by the time this news reached the settlers, they started attacking Abu Anan's house like they did many times before. And Abu Anan, when he got home from the hospital, he was asked to file a complaint with Israeli civil administration. So he made a complaint. He pointed out exactly who did what, because the likely perpetrators were already assembled into a room. And the police officer, he told Abu Anan at the end of the story, he told them, "I swear you are speaking the truth. These settlers should be punished." The next day, after spending one night in the police station, all the settlers were released without charges. The Israeli human rights organization Yesh Din reports that 90% of settler violence go unpunished. So whether it's spitting on a Palestinian man, throwing stones at Palestinian houses or shops, taking over a Palestinian-owned house, or nearly killing an elderly man, the settlers are always protected by soldiers and rarely punished for their crimes. And when I heard all these stories, I would always wonder how people can stay sane in the midst of all this. And I think this is especially very hard for the youth. And the youth are, of course, also the ones who sometimes make themselves heard in the old city, of which I will describe to you a scene. I was on a Friday in the old city. And Friday is usually not the day to go to the old city because it's totally empty. And also this is the day of confrontations between Palestinians and the Israeli army. However, from the point where I was living, if I could walk through the old city, but if I wanted to take another way, I had to take a car, which would drive me 25 minutes because you have to go all around the center of Hebron, because this is closed off for traffic and closed off for Palestinians. But I like walking. I wanted to walk, even though, I mean, walking is even a privilege in Palestine, because I could walk where Palestinians couldn't walk, and I wouldn't have to be so terrified of what would happen to me at the checkpoint. So I was walking, and I walked in the street, which was completely empty, apart from 3 little children who were playing in the street. Other than that, it was completely empty. And at some point, I looked up, and I looked right in the faces of 2 Israeli soldiers who were standing on a Palestinian building. And they were fully armed, of course, and they were pointing their guns into the street where I was walking. And I felt, together with the children, I mean, even children more than me, but I felt very unshielded. I felt very exposed. And I didn't know why they were standing there. So, you know, a bit naive, I asked them, "Can I go on?" And they told me, "You can go wherever you want." So I went on, and then I found myself at the outskirts of the Friday protest. So every Friday, a crowd of young Palestinians, sometimes a bigger crowd, sometimes a smaller crowd, it would mostly depend on what happened in Palestine that week, would confront the Israeli soldiers at the entrance of the old city where, you know, the Israeli control starts. And every time I would see this scene, I was overcome by how absurd it is, because, you know, the average age of these Palestinians is like 15 or 16. They're young boys. They would wear T-shirts, and they would throw stones at soldiers who have every thinkable and unthinkable weapon at their disposal. And, you know, it may seem like a joke if it were not for the fact that many boys and men found their death here. I also had a friend who told me that when he was 16, his 16-year-old friend bled to death in front of his eyes at this place, but he couldn't help because they were still held under shot. And Mahmoud, the woman I told you about before, she told me that every Friday she locks her whole house. She doesn't sleep to prevent her boys from joining the protests, which is, of course, it makes sense. But I would also always understand these young boys who want to throw stones, because no young person without dreams, no young person with dreams would go down without a fight. And, fighting because Palestinians are trapped. Many of my friends, they told me that 71% of the world is covered with ocean, and yet Palestinians don't have access to it. And it used to be, in the past, you could pick up your family in Gaza and you could go drink coffee in Lebanon or Jordan or Syria, and you could swim in Jaffa, which is next to Tel Aviv, and you could go pray in Jerusalem. And now, if Palestinians want to get out of their city even, but also if they want to get out of the West Bank, they face checkpoints in every direction. And if they want to get out of the West Bank, they need a permit. And these permits, it's very unclear when and why you would get a permit. It's not like there's a website that you can go to and check if you're eligible or not. It's arbitrary, and even if you get a permit, it may easily be revoked without reason also. And another thing is the wall. So Palestinians, they bump on this wall, which is 12-meter high wall made of concrete, and it bears so many resemblances to the wall we once had in Europe. And this wall we now call the wall of shame, because it tore families apart and because it impeded the movement of all people living in this area. And I wonder, how long are we going to have double standards? The last scene I want to describe to you, I'm sorry if it's long, is when I was eating pizza on a sidewalk in the new center of Hebron with my friend. There is a photo, this is him. And he told me, he drew me the map that I think all of us know. You see that Palestine shrunk and shrunk and shrunk in history, and in 1946 most of historic Palestine still belonged to the Palestinians, but by now they barely have anything left. And my friend said, "You see this? Israel will not stop. In some years there will be no Palestine. We will not be here. Remember me. Remember I said this. You will see. We will be gone." And my greatest wish is to prove him wrong. I don't think that we can let this happen. And the increasing numbers of settlers that move to the West Bank and their unconditional support and protection that they get from the Israeli army, even in their criminal behavior, and the royal benefits they receive from the Israeli government, suggest that settlers are not, as we may sometimes hope or think, the extreme outcasts, at the extreme end of the Israeli spectrum, but they are very much part of the goal of the Israeli project. And they make also clear that 78% was never enough. Taking 78% of Palestine, historic Palestine, was never enough, and they seem to want to colonize all of Palestine and evict all Palestinians from their land. And silence is complicity, and I think that if we don't let ourselves be heard, we will find ourselves on the wrong side of history. And I know that, from coming from Europe, facing the situation in Palestine also means facing ourselves, which is also the same here. I mean, all our countries have a long history of colonialism, settler colonialism and neo-colonialism, and many of our countries helped found Israel in its current state, and we did that. I mean, there may be many reasons, and we can discuss about it, but probably it was for creating a Western bloc, securing Western hegemony in the Middle East, and also to make up for a history of relentless Jewish persecution. And I know that the history is incredibly painful, But Palestinians are not the one who should pay for the pain of our history. And one thing that's very important here is that anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism shouldn't be conflated. That critique on Zionism is not critique on Jews or Judaism, because I think it's very clear that Israeli policies are not in any way based on Jewish values. So we should be able to criticize Israel for its blatant disrespect of human rights, of the human rights of Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza, as well as those Palestinians living inside Israel. We should be able to criticize Israel for demanding its right to self-determination while it's constantly undermining the right to self-determination of the Palestinians. And we should criticize our governments for pretending to value human rights, but continuously supporting a regime that does not care about the human rights of Palestinians at all. In 1997, the year I was born, Nelson Mandela said, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." And I'm sad it has to be said again today, but it has to be said again today. And as I think Melissa already quoted, no one is free until all are free. And freedom is not something that can be partial, and it cannot be at the cost of someone else or other people. And the earth is round, so we cannot escape each other. We are bound to live together, and I think that can be a beautiful thing. So yeah, the last thing I wanted to say is that whenever I'm thinking about these things, the thing that goes through my mind the most is we can do so much better. And I want to end with that. We can do so much better.
I'm going to invite all of our visitors to come up and join me, and we'll have some question and answer, some informal discussion with the audience. So please come up, and I'll let you guys pass this back and forth.
So feel free to ask any question you want.
Just a factual question. In Area 1 and Area 2, what are the populations, the Palestinian and the Israeli, in each area? Do you know?
You're asking about how many people, or what's the population?
What percentage is Palestinian and Israeli in each of the two areas?
H1 and H2.
For me, I don't know the exact answer, but Melissa, are you familiar with any exact percentage?
Or even, even an estimate, just to have a sense of that.
There's approximately in H2 area 600, between 500 and 600.
So there are 700 settlers living outside of the settlements in H2, and then you have these two settlements that are also that are bordering on the old city, and they contain 7,000 settlers. But the number of, I don't know, do you know the number of Palestinians? It's a lot bigger, at least. Yeah, in H2. Yeah.
The whole number of Palestinians is 215 and 452. 1,000, yeah, 1,000.
So it's like
In Hebron.
80 or 90 to 1, it sounds like.
Yeah, it is in area 1 and area 2.
Thank you. Another question? Yes, please.
Do any of you or the Tree of Life Foundation have any relationship or contacts with the organization J Street, which is a Jewish lobbying group in Washington that opposes the major Jewish lobby and their policies, and they seem to have a great interest in actually securing Palestinian rights. Does anybody have any information about that?
May I answer?
Yeah, I can just say, like, if you're asking about our relationships with them, with community peacemaker teams, we share our reporting and our information with a lot of organizations, including J Street.
And one of you.
I am a member of a group called GAG, Grandmothers Against Gun Violence. So your issues are very close to our hearts. I went to Washington on the invitation of the Brady campaign, and they said, we will make a phone call that you can talk to some people at J Street in deference to K Street. K Street is strictly for Israeli concerns and objectives, whereas the J Street people are trying, and I emphasize trying to make a difference for the Palestinians. But my impression after the visit was they're not too successful. But at least they are people of goodwill. And as an afterthought, if I may, I've been in Hebron with my husband on foot without a tour group. We were just 2 people. We went to the temple, heavily guarded by Israeli military. When we came down, there was a shooting. Right as we came down the steps, my husband, who is British, fled to the next door opening, and I stood there my grounds. And I kept feeling, why would anybody shoot at me just for visiting their country? So my experience was mixed in Hebron.
I might say on behalf of Tree of Life, we're always looking for good allies to work with. It's important for us as organizations to be able to work collaboratively wherever we can find allies. And I'm really grateful for, since we started in our church, which is a Christian church in Old Lyme, and I'm really grateful for the fact that it's branched out, and we now have, thanks to Gufran, we have a number of Muslims that are among our greatest allies. And in the Jewish community, we are aware of J Street, and they do some very good work. And I remember Nihad Awad of the Council on American Islamic Relations said, they're making people angry in Washington, so they must be doing something right. For me, they're still too much into this two-state resolution. They're holding out hope, and they're not alone. There are a lot of people who still think that the final answer is going to be a two-state resolution. But nevertheless, they're out there fighting the occupation, and I applaud them for that. Probably our closest ally in the Jewish community is Jewish Voice for Peace. And they do outstanding work. Jewish Voice for Peace now has a number of chapters throughout the country. The one that we work with most closely is Jewish Voice for Peace New Haven, and they put me in touch with a brand new ally. She just started this last summer. Her name is Mei Yi. She's a Chinese American. She's a rabbinical student, just graduating from rabbinical school, and she's starting up a brand new synagogue in New Haven called Mending Minyan Synagogue. And they, in their mission statement, are intentionally anti-Zionist. So you can imagine how, what kind of reception she's going to receive and has received, working there in the Yale New Haven neighborhood. But I applaud allies wherever they might be. We may not agree on everything, but we can agree on some things. And we need as many as possible if we're to bring the settler colonialism and the occupation to an end.
I wondered what percentage of the settlers are American?
That's a good question. What percentage of the settlers are American? Anybody know?
I do know that Brooklyn, New York, represents the most percentage of the people who are in H2, but I don't know the numbers. We could find out. I don't know.
Anybody else have an answer to that? I can speak for myself. You go through Kiryat Arba, you hear a lot of American accents right there, and Goldstein, who perpetrated the horrible violence, the massacre, he was from Brooklyn, New York. So there's strong American influence among the settlers in Hebron area.
Um,
Go ahead.
When Goldstein perpetrated the massacre, was the Abrahamic mosque already divided between Muslim services and Jewish services, as it is
Right,
today?
yeah.
Was it already?
Yeah, was it?
If you can repeat the question for those online.
Sure. Yeah, the question was, thank you, Christiane. Yeah, the question was, before the massacre, was the Ibrahimi Mosque divided, Jewish on one side and Muslim on the other? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
The answer is no. The Ibrahim Mosque was for Muslims, but after the massacre, the Ibrahim Mosque was divided into two parts, 16% for Israeli Jew and 40% for Muslims. Also, after the massacre, there is 10 days per year. They allow for both sides, Muslims and for Israeli Jew, to take the whole mosque in a holidays in the year.
I saw a question over here.
I was wondering what the effects of COVID was, especially on Bethlehem.
I'm glad you asked that question. What are the effects of COVID on the Palestinian people, particularly in the Bethlehem area? On the economy, yeah.
Actually, many small businesses has been closed during the COVID-19. And as you know that the movement is restricted for everyone, especially in Palestine, in America, and all over the world. And but we managed it, like for education, the Minister of Education managed it very well, and they tried to reach each home to have an online studying. Also, the health minister also has many procedures for us to protect ourselves from spreading COVID. So we had a good management for COVID-19 in Palestine. And there is a big percentage of Palestinians who are now vaccinated for the COVID-19. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I would like to add just something that COVID has been, used in a negative way, that Israel, restricted the movement of Palestinians on the checkpoints because of COVID. So they're saying, because you might have COVID, we're not going to allow you to go through our checkpoint, go find another way. So instead of reaching their homes in 5 minutes, they're going to go and find a way just to reach their homes in 30 minutes or something. And in terms of tourism, so many shops, so I know so many friends in the old town, they just closed their shops because already the old town, because of the Israeli behaviors, it is, as Dali said, it's like a ghost town. What if, and after COVID, like it was really, really, for me, it was really scary to go there.
I can share a little bit too about Tree of Life's experience with COVID in Palestine and Israel. We were not able to go over there for 2 years. And one of the things that's the lifeblood for the economy for the Palestinians, particularly around Bethlehem area, is tourist. They have a major at Bethlehem University, don't they? It's on hotel management, and all those hotels were shut down during the time of the pandemic. So it had a devastating impact upon the economy. But there was also duplicity in the way that the pandemic was handled. As you may remember from the news reports, Israel was getting a lot of congratulations on how they were handling it, how they were bringing the vaccines to their people. Whereas those people in Palestine, they were held way back behind. How many of us received the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine? And for our Palestinian people, for a long time, the only vaccine they could get was one called Sputnik. Finally, the vaccinations came to the Palestinian people, but it took a long time. So much so that one of the great journalists over there, when I'm looking for encouragement, I read Gideon Levy, I read the Mondoweiss, I also read the articles of Amira Haas, who writes for Haaretz as well. And she wrote a great article for Haaretz called Vaccine Apartheid. So you received Sputnik and then you had to go back and get?
Yeah, I took Sputnik, but it is not allowed here in America, so I had to take Pfizer. So I'm now vaccinated 4 times.
I'm wondering if Shadiq and Dalia, and actually all of you, would say any personal harassment that you have had in the last few years in your life.
What was the question? Any personal?
Harassment by the Israeli forces in Hebron. And if you haven't, how have you avoided it? And do you expect to get more harassment when you return after speaking out?
Okay. Thank you, Diane. Yeah, the question is, have they experienced any personal harassment, I assume by either the IDF or the settlers, and do they anticipate any harassment when they get back home?
Would you like to start? Yeah, 3 years ago, before being an English literature graduate, that was, my freshman year at university. So the way that I used to practice my English is to go to the old town, find random tourists, and to talk with them. One day I found, a group that was going to the old city and also Al Ibrahimi Mosque. I went with them. And at the checkpoint, I was the only guy who was detained because I'm a Palestinian. I also had a backpack, and, there was like kind of iron, I don't know what they call it. Ruler, yeah. So they've been checking, and it's just a ruler. He told me, why you're holding a knife? It's a ruler. And he said, no, it's a knife. Anyway, take it and go. But at that point, I just remember he prepared his gun and he put it at me, and I was really scared. I was, shaken. That was one of the situations that really affected me. There's also a situation that happened to my cousin. Shuhada Street in 2015, has witnessed so many assassination incidents by the Israelis. So my cousin, his name is Farouk Sider, was a sophomore university student, and he was just going peacefully, going to Al Ibrahimi Mosque, and out of nothing, he got shot in the middle of his head, and he was killed, dead on the ground. And here's something. One of the Arab guys took a picture of his body, once he was shot. There was no knife. And after an hour, there was another photo released by the Israelis, and there was a knife. So they threw it away beside his body. So these are just 2 personal stories. I know more, but I want to give the space to Dalia.
For me personally, 6 years ago, or maybe a little bit more, I was a kid, and I have 3 other younger little sisters in home. My father wasn't home. He was traveling abroad, Palestine. So me, my little sisters, and my mother, we were sleeping at home. In the midnight, suddenly, a group of soldiers came to our home for the first time in my life and my little sisters. They knocked the door very, very, very hardly with their weapons. I got shocked, me and my mom told me, don't feel afraid, because it seemed that someone is going to thief our home. There is nothing big to deal about. But I feel there is something wrong. Then we saw the laser that's going out from the weapon on our windows of the door. So my mom said, those are the Israeli soldiers, just keep calm and quiet and turn off all the lights of the home. So I did that. I turned off the lights of the home, and we opened the door for them. So my old sisters woken up and came and sat beside us and saw the soldiers. For me, I did not feel that little bit afraid because I was a little bit mature. And they said they want to take my mom and show them where is our neighbor home. So one of the soldiers took my mom, and the other 4 soldiers stayed with us at home. My mom was feeling very sad and bad and worried about what these soldiers may do for us as a girls. So they took my mom in the midnight, for 5 minutes, then they returned my mom home. And after they're leaving, my sisters started crying all the night, and we could not contact with any of our relatives and neighbors because they are controlling social media and phones. They hear everything. So we decided not contacting with them because if we did, the Israeli soldiers would think that we are doing something wrong and would return back to our home and arrest one of us. I remember that once upon a time I went to a university in Ramallah called Abu Dis University. So I was just going to visit a group of friends there, and suddenly the Israeli soldiers started throwing out tear gas on students. So I ran away fastly to protect myself from them. And also, me as a Palestinian and Sadiq, we cannot post anything on social media because social media is fully controlled by the Israeli government. So I cannot post anything about the current situation in Palestine. I just post general things that may not cause me any questions with the Israeli government. And that's it.
Did I see a question back here?
Yeah, I've long admired the type in the communities and families of Palestinians, and I wonder what type of a toll is being taken because of the occupation as far as domestic violence, kids dropping out of school, mental health issues, and things like that, and I assume the resources are inadequate to deal with.
If I understand the question, you're talking about what kind of toll it's had on the Palestinian families that are admired for how tight they are. Is that the question? Okay. So they're talking about he admires the families, the Palestinian families, and what kind of toll has the occupation had on? What kind of damage has the occupation done to the families?
Oh, all right. So, okay. So as you see that kids, when the kids has violence from out family or from inside family, that cause on their mental health. And this thing that cause for them many problems for them in the future. As you know, me as a kid, I'm not conscious very well of what is going on around me. But when I become more younger, I behave things unconsciously depending on the things that I faced when I was a kid. So, like we are Palestinians. Like we are patient, all right? We like to take risks, so we don't feel afraid, and we know very well that this occupation will end soon, inshallah, one day. And I think what they did for us when I was, for example, a kid, I know they built in me a personality that I cannot feel afraid of them, and I can fight them, but in a good way. Not like what they did for us violently.
Yes, please.
First off, thank you for your presentation today, your witness, and your voice. I've been to the Holy Land 3 times, to Hebron, to the West Bank, and what you have witnessed for us today, I've experienced in 2013, 2014, 2019. Nothing's changed, has it? So my question is, what is the avenue? What is the path out? What is the path to peace?
The question is, having been over there, seeing how things have not changed, or if they've changed for the worse. What is the pathway that we have for a better future? Is that okay?
Well, what I would like to say is that the court is in the ball is in the Israeli court. Like they have control over everything. So as Palestinians, we can't do nothing in regard of what you're talking about. Israelis decide if they want to follow a more peaceful path or not. Yeah, that's it. If you have anything to add.
Let's let each one of you offer a perspective on this.
In my opinion, we are Palestinians, we like peace, we don't like violence, all right? So if they want peace, there is peace under state of Palestine. If you want to live in the state of Palestine, you are welcome. It doesn't matter if you are a Jew, a Christian, or a Muslim, but under the state of Palestine. And we are all wishing freedom for Palestine.
Yeah, I think as a non-Palestinian, I don't have an answer for that, except I can speak to my role and maybe our role, those of us who are here who are not Palestinian, and that is to find your place in this struggle. It might be writing letters, it might be listening, you're here today, it might be giving money, it might be going on one of the journeys that they have, or a delegation with another organization, and just searching your heart and your soul to see what's my place in this. It's a global movement. It takes all of us.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question. I also don't have the answer, although everyone always wants to know. Yeah, I used to think that it would come from governments, but then, I don't know, Melissa and me, we also talked about it. I think maybe it should come from, down to up first, because governments don't seem to be very susceptible to, I don't know, arguments of human rights even. So I think that by having these kinds of events, when we were in New York the day before yesterday, we stumbled on a pro-Palestine protest in Times Square, and I hope these kinds of movements are gaining in people, in voices. I can't really compare, because I don't know how it was like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but I have a feeling maybe something is changing, and if more and more people are going to speak out, you cannot, as a government, just without scrutiny give so much money to Israel, and then Israel will be held accountable, and hopefully they'll change their ways. That's what I hope.
And I'll offer my response to that question too, and we'll bring the Q&A to a close here with this. The fulcrum of change is right here with us. And nothing over there is going to change until we change. So I'm grateful for that question, because it brings it back to the circle. During Q&A you're always kind of walking a tightrope, because you never know how it's going to turn out. But one of my favorite things that happened during one of our Q&A sessions, and it was actually at the Lutheran Church, when our speakers were up here in the front and responded to questions, and somebody from the audience got very condescending and turned to our Palestinian visitors and said, "Well, don't you have to compromise on something?" Never mind all the compromises that have already taken place, all the losses that they've already suffered. And there was a young girl who was one of our invitees. Her name was Dunya. Is that a familiar Palestinian name? Dunya. Dunya was 9 years old, and she came over here by herself because her mother, Harwich, was not allowed out of Israel, not allowed out of Palestine. Dunya had the courage to come over by herself. And when she got that question from a member of our audience saying, "Well, don't you have something to compromise? Isn't that the only way forward?" Dunya stood up there and she taught me, I don't know many Arabic words, but she taught me a very important word that we should all remember. The word is la. La means no. La. And it's time for all of us. If we hope for a better future, we need to start saying la to the occupation, la to the role of our own country's complicity in the occupation. We give $8 to $10 million per day to the state of Israel. And that's not out of the goodness of our heart. That goes over there and buys, and with that, then Israel is able to buy weaponry to perpetuate the occupation. So my response to that is the way forward is all of us to begin to say la to the occupation, and then the Arabic word, as I understand it, for yes is Iowa. We need to say Iowa to the beautiful spirit that we see represented here today. So Iowa, thank you for being with us, and thank you all for being with us. Elaine, let's have a round of applause for Elaine. So go home.